all of a sudden one day we get a call. Hey, you guys come to the ranch. And we're like, oh, this is awesome, you know?
Yeah.
So we jump in the truck and we head in there. And I just remember feeling like, oh, you know, I've finally been called.
You finally watched enough TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you're worthy.
Don't tell anybody. That was supposed to be a secret. But anyway, I remember the reason I remember the TV so well is because we were watching Dirty Jobs by Mike Rowe. Yeah, I love that show. I love that.
Of course, you're watching Dirty Jobs.
It's work, you know.
Yeah,
it's like, how can I get better at work?
Yeah. So I can build Zion.
Yeah,
exactly.
And anyway, it was so interesting because we got called there, and I remember we lived at our grandpa's house at the time, so I went there and we hung out with our dad, and I hadn't seen him for a year or whatever, and he was under all this stress too. Anyway, so I moved there and I fit right in, you know, pretty well. And then later on, someone come to me and I think it was my dad. He's like, hey, you can go across the street and get the trainings. Don't tell anybody you're doing this, but you need to go listen to all of the trainings that had been given.
So this is trainings from Warren Jeffs?
Yeah, so these were like...
So you were at the ranch at that point, though. And how old were you when that happened?
On my 16th birthday, I moved to the ranch.
Okay,
so I'll
16th
always
birthday.
remember that.
Okay, 16th birthday, you moved to the ranch. And what were you doing when you first got there?
So the very first thing I remember doing was I went and stacked a bunch of old Simon forms.
Okay.
And it was just this big yard, and it's clear full of these forms, and I'm like, wow. But it was such a pleasure for me to go do these.
Right.
Anyway, so I go and I start stacking these forms by hand, and they're, you know, I don't know if you know what Simon forms are, but...
I'm assuming concrete?
Yeah, big concrete metal forms, and I'm
Yeah.
like this 16-year-old kid, so I'm, you know, strong and everything. So anyway, I start stacking forms, and my dad was on and off the ranch at this time, and things started changing there as well. So I'm stacking forms, I'm doing all this other stuff, and then I started working in the ready mix there, because that's what I did growing up. My dad owned a ready mix company, so I remember driving the mixer truck around and helping pour concrete.
And this was all within the ranch,
yeah,
the compound.
Yeah, we didn't go anywhere off of that.
So time out really fast here. Before you were allowed to do any of this work and do any of the things you're talking about now, did you have to go listen to these trainings?
Yeah, so that was what. Okay. But what happened is I started listening to them, and then they're like, you know what, we need you, so just come to work. But previously, before that, when people went there, they had to sit in a room and listen to every single one of those before they could even come out.
How many were there? How long did that take?
It was hours, and it was probably, I don't know, if you listened to them consistently, it probably would have taken you, I don't know, 2-3 weeks.
Oh my word!
And for those of you that have heard Warren Jeffs' voice, his speak and his manner of speaking, imagine listening to that for weeks or days on end.
I just remember, and it was really bad to fall asleep. I just remember like getting them and just sleeping pretty much through all of them.
Wow.
So,
and what kind of trainings? Were they trainings about the kind of job you were supposed to be doing, or were they more like preaching?
They were more like how to, and a lot of it was about the United Order. A lot of it was how to be a better person. And what was interesting about it is you hear a lot of these success gurus that are out here. A lot of it was discipline. It really was. So he had a lot of good things in there. I learned a lot of great things going through those. But it was mostly just about discipline, about respecting your elders, and you know, most of it was about morals. You know, not how to not think a bad thought, how to do this, and it was mostly stuff about that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
About the separation between men and women. And even later on down the road, like the wives and the husbands couldn't sleep together. They couldn't even sleep in the same room.
I heard that. I mean, it was they would shake each other's hands in
well,
passing.
And even that they couldn't. They later on down the road that you couldn't do that.
Not even shake hands.
Not even shake hands. It was no touching, zero.
Oh my word!
And this wasn't just in the ranch. This was for everyone.
This was later on, but like in the ranch, this started happening.
Oh, okay.
And this was after Warren was already in prison.
Yeah. So all of these trainings were before he actually went to prison.
Okay, so the trainings were from before, but all of the rules and that kind of stuff, like the crazy rules between husbands and wives, was already...
Yeah, that got implemented there first, and then from there it went down back to the creek. But from there, I remember I listened to all of those, and then I became the guy that would go suck out all of the septic tanks around the ranch.
Oh, fun
So
job.
yeah. So I became that guy. So I remember going and doing that. I went and sucked out all of the septic tanks. I'd go dump it in the sewer pond, and then after that, I became drove one of those big haul trucks because we were building the sewer ponds at the time.
Wow.
And then after that, then they said, okay, we need you to go back to work. So I went back to work for the concrete company there, and we actually left the ranch, and I went to work in, I believe it was San Diego at the time.
Oh, interesting.
So every time you guys went to work, or because it sounds like multiple times, you move somewhere and then they say go back to work.
Yeah.
Did you know that the intention was like, I have to go work just to make money to send back to the church so they could keep doing?
Yeah, definitely. We knew that's what was going on, but we loved it. We were like, yes, we get to go provide for the families, because that's what they were telling you. Okay, you're going to provide for these families, which half of those families are yours. Those are your siblings.
Yeah.
You need to go out and provide for them. So I remember we would head out, we would go, and they would give us these little PEX cards, they would call them. And I remember we had $100 a week to spend on our food and everything. And so even going to all these places, we went to California, we were working there. We weren't supposed to go anywhere. We were supposed to go to work and straight back home.
Well, yeah, $100, that's barely going to cover food.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it was too. And so even me growing up, we didn't really get paid. I remember, and if we did get paid, our paychecks would usually go to our families to keep our families sustained.
So, and would the paychecks come through your hands, or
sometimes they would with different companies. I know there was a lot of companies that wouldn't even give them to you because then you would take it and go spend it on yourself, which that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
So
you wouldn't want to actually be able to do something for yourself with the money that you earn.
And if you did get the money, you wouldn't know what to do. You'd probably go buy a car or something because that was what was cool. So
you get a truck and get it lifted and get the tint, right?
See, and a lot of the men out there, including myself, we had more freedom than that. We would get our paycheck, and then it was just expected of us to give a certain amount of that to our families. So
when I very first went to work, that's how it was.
Okay.
But then later on, then they says, okay, this can no longer happen. You were no longer even getting a paycheck. It's going straight into what.
Well, and once you're at the
buy-in,
right?
Yeah.
And that probably happened with my family as well later on.
You had left.
Right, after I moved out, yep.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of that did. But anyway, going back to the ranch there. So we went to work off the ranch, and we started working in San Diego. I remember working in New Mexico, a bunch of different places. I can't remember them all. But it was all over the United States. We'd just travel there, we'd work, and then we'd come back to the ranch every 2 weeks.
So these places you were working, were they compounds of the church, or were they just random places that the company had a job?
No, they were random places. They were so what we would do is Walmarts. We would do Walmart slabs and things like that.
Okay.
And we were already really hard workers because that's how we grew up. So we would go just bust out a job really quick. Everybody was like, oh, you guys are so awesome. I've never seen
like that.
People work this hard.
Get it done so fast.
Yeah, but that's all we were doing. So anyway, I remember we built places in 5 Walmarts in Tucson.
Wow.
We built Walmarts everywhere. That's what we did. We just followed them around.
In southern Utah, where I grew up, and it was outside the community, but it was still well known that if you could get the polygamous guys to be in any part of the construction process, you were going to have a better home, and it was going to be done faster, and they were just hard workers. Everybody in southern Utah and probably in northern Utah too knew that you wanted the polygamous construction companies because they were going to be solid, and
we would work
do the best
long
work.
Hours, we would work holidays, we would work weekends, and
that is true.
And we would work really hard because unlike the normal person that once they get done with work, they can go home and do something they want to do. No, when we were done, when we were done working, we would just had to go back and do something that we were told to do.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of liberating to be out on a job site, right?
It was, and the interesting thing about that is I remember I took a week off. It was the first time I remember taking a week off of work. It's because one of my moms got cancer. Anyway, well, I think she's better now. I don't really have contact with them anymore, but. I remember I took a week off and I just felt like I didn't even know how to feel. I'm like, what do I do with my time? I have no clue when no one's telling me what to do. All I do is low fear and I don't do anything. I don't feel like doing anything. I have 0 goals in life. The only goal I had in life was to pay my truck payment, So I remember that. Taking that week off and I felt nothing. I'm like, I got to get back to work. And it was like, I was antsy. I'm like,
that's all you know how to do.
What do I do? What do I do?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, when you were at the Zion Ranch and you said you were going back every 2 weeks and stuff, at this point, since the raid had already happened, what was the feeling and the vibe there? Was there just a ton of fear, or was it like work has to continue as normal because Warren's in prison, right? The raid had already happened, so you guys knew that was a possibility that could happen again. What kept everyone like motivated to continue on with the project, like to continue trying to like build Zion?
So
without a profit or without...
I guess what kept us going was we were told that he was going to be liberated. He was told if we would work hard enough, if we would prepare enough, he was going to come back and rescue us. Exactly. And it didn't matter where we were at. He was going to find us and get us.
Right.
And he was going to bring us back. If we, stayed in touch with God, with Heavenly Father, we were going to be called back.
So put on your shoulders to be righteous enough.
100%.
Yep.
And even originally when he was caught, we all felt like it was our responsibility that he had gotten caught because we had not prepared enough.
Gotcha.
So at the ranch, the vibe was that everyone was just going to work harder. We were given these deadlines. If everyone worked hard enough, we would be called back, or he would be called back, and we would be lifted up or whatever. We were taught that we had control of the heavenly fire and all of that, where the actual boundaries of the ranch were going to be lit up with fire, and no one was going to be able to penetrate it.
Oh, wow.
So
I have not heard that one yet. So.
And this was real to me. So one of the things, going back to work, we worked until a certain time, and then they said, okay, everyone who is part of the ranch is called back. And that's when they kind of closed it all off again. And they no longer allowed just anyone on, because for a time there they were allowing whoever on, and then they rededicated all the buildings and closed everything back off again. And then I just remember I was mostly, because by this time my dad was the bishop there, and so what was really awesome about my dad is one thing is he never, to my knowledge, never took advantage of people or anything. Like even with us, he would make us work harder than anyone else. He would not give us anything out of the storehouse. We had to go work for that. So I take my hat off to him for that.
Yeah, well, there were a lot of really good men and women out there. That's for sure. I mean, they were just doing what they were told to do, right?
Yeah,
and
what they believe.
trying to live their life the best they could. So I don't doubt for a second that he was just trying to live the best life he could.
And he was. But going back to that, anyway, so I would get called to be on guard duty a lot. So we had this guard gate at the front of the ranch that would look all the way down that big long road. I don't know if you guys remember that.
I've seen it only in videos and in the documentaries and stuff. The long road.
Big, long. It's like a 2-mile road.
Yeah, I've never been there in person, so I've only seen videos.
But I just remember I would get called to be in this guard tower, and so I would be sitting there, and it had video cameras all over. And we started listening to stories and stuff, and that was really bad because stories were bad. So we would someone would send us a story or something, and I just remember listening to stories and things like that.
Watch out for those podcasts and those YouTubers. Don't listen to podcasts.
That's exactly what it was.
Caution. Yes.
But anyway, I just remember spending night after night after night there and looking out there, and then someone calling, hey, this is so-and-so. Coming back, and I would have to, sometimes I'd look through the list, or I would have to call in to make sure they were on the list to get in. So most of the time it was other people would come to the gate to deliver things, and I would try to coordinate that to make sure that someone went out there and got that, pick that stuff up. And then after that, then they would put me on other duties. Like there was a big hill in the ranch. We would go sit up there in our pickups, and we would just have a view of the entire property.
Wow.
And I remember getting my binoculars on and just looking at everything. If you see some kind of a little light or something.
See someone sneaking out their window.
Yeah. Sorry. But we would be up on that, and we'd be looking down. We would be looking for anybody and everybody, and we'd try to, kind of document everything, make sure everything was going on. And I don't remember this, but I think that if anything happened, you were supposed to write it down and fill out some kind of a report or something like that.
Yeah.
So there was that, and then there was another person that would do inside the ranch. So there was 4 or 5 different security details.
Wow.
So there was the one in the tower. There was the one that would do the perimeter. Mm-hmm. There was a road all the way around. You would either be in a pickup truck or you'd be on one of those 4-wheelers.
Okay.
And you'd just
drive,
loop around all night long.
Was that to keep people out or to keep people in?
We were told it was to keep people out. And the thing is everybody that was there wanted to be there.
Okay.
Like they felt like it was this great calling that they got told to be a part of it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So we would loop around, and then we had someone that would stay inside the perimeter where the community was itself, and they would just drive up and down every single road all night long. Just sit there and drive, back and forth.
So, because, I mean, not only the perimeter, but also within the community, were they nervous that someone had jumped the wall or something?
And yeah, there was people that would jump the wall all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there was actually people, they caught a group of people coming in one time, and then they would gather them up, and then call the cops. And
wow.
A group of just...
Sometimes they were like illegal aliens from the border. One time they caught like a whole group of them coming across.
Oh, really?
And they didn't realize they were on your property?
Yeah,
or?
and even one time they had stolen a pickup inside there. They got all the way in and they stole a pickup and they were driving off and they caught them.
Yeah.
So there was actually a lot of stuff going on.
More than what you would think.
And even later on down the road, I heard stories about people sneaking back in to come and hang out with their wives and stuff that never did get caught. And they're like, you guys should beef your security up. But they were part of it, so they knew what to do to get in and out.
They were sneaky, okay.
Well,
So,
I'm going to sneak to go see your wife.
Yeah. That's
so that you
exactly.
can shake her hand in secret.
So let's say you're doing the loops, right? Mm-hmm. And you run across someone that shouldn't be there. What do you do? Like,
this is where we were told that we had this, the Spirit of God. We could do whatever we wanted. We could command heavenly fire to come down and burn that person.
Okay, so you see someone, you're like, the Force.
Yeah, use the Force. But but it was a real thing to us. And what they told us, they were like, be careful with what you say because that will happen.
Okay.
Wow.
And it was real. It was so real to us that we were very careful with our wording, with everything like that, because we didn't know what was going to happen. But we were told all of these great things were going to happen.
Yeah, if they could. If you have that kind of power, then you need to be very cautious with it, right?
100%.
Wow.
So that was a pretty interesting story about that. And then I remember you telling me that you guys wanted to talk a little bit about the United Order and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So at what point?
So I remember being on the ranch, and then we got some other different and new trainings about the United Order. So there was a storehouse, and what they would tell us to do was they says, you need to take every single belonging you have, take it to the storehouse, write it down, and then whatever you get told you can take, that's what you can take, and you have to leave everything else there.
So this happened on the ranch as well.
Yeah.
Because this also happened in Hilldale's and Colorado
City. So this happened
City.
at the ranch a lot sooner than it happened at Hilldale.
Like
so it's like it would.
So they were already living consecration.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because the history of the church in Joseph Smith was the law of consecration. And the early saints did try to do that themselves, and it didn't work out.
It seemed like
but
everywhere.
they tried that as well. And it is something that, Zion's supposed to be able to do that. So I'm not surprised that they tried to do that at an early stage.
And it seemed like everywhere that would fail. It just failed every single time. But it was almost like you had to 100% live it, or you wouldn't get anything back. And there would be certain people that would take advantage of it. So certain people would be living like kings, and the rest of us would be, living like peasants.
Yeah, I was going to say, who got to decide that?
And it was the person in charge.
Okay, so that person in charge gets to decide, and then basically they become the person who decides how everybody lives.
100%. And you couldn't, I remember, you couldn't go into the storehouse and get certain things. You had to request them. And so they would know who was requesting certain things. And also it was pretty free for all too. You'd walk in there, and at the early stages of it, there was a lot of money going around. So we had nice things to choose from. We'd walk in there. It was like a store. You would get whatever you needed, and then you'd write it down. And it was actually really nice when it was stocked. And there was certain things that you couldn't get that you'd have to request, sometimes I think it was shoes, certain pieces of clothing and things like that. Or like say that your truck needed fixed, then you would write that down and then we had a mechanic and he would fix our stuff.
We have some slips, actually. We have some of the
really?
request slips
We've
from
seen those
Hilldale.
from people.
We have them in the other room. I have some that from
that's
people
so awesome.
asking for like cinder blocks. Like, we need a wall around our house.
Yeah.
Requesting for the cinder blocks.
And they would put all that together and then come and do it. And
So
I remember being called to do certain requests for people, like move some rocks into their place so that they could have some nice landscaping and things like that. So really, if you did live it right, it could have been really awesome. It could have been very freeing and everybody would have lived together. But the problem with it is certain people would request certain things and then they were always out. So we never got to experience those.
Yeah.
I
It's a great hypothetical.
It is.
Right.
And I remember like shampoo and stuff like that. You could only get a week's worth. So that's all you could ever get. You could never go buy a big bottle of shampoo and just get it and just have it for a month. It's like you had to only get a week's worth. So you could only ever have a week's worth.
So I assume all the men that would go to work would just give all their money to the church, and then the church would go out and stock up the storehouse. Is that how it worked out? And then if you needed something, was there anything, food as well?
It was really awesome because when it was working great, you'd go in there and there was just food. You could go pick out whatever you wanted.
Okay.
So, but the problem was a lot of people became greedy and they're like, oh, this is awesome because I could just come and get whatever I want. And so that's why it ended up failing, I believe.
Yeah.
Was because people got greedy.
People had a lot. Some people had a lot and some people had none. Right?
That's true.
And that seems to happen a lot in life.
When you're trying to distribute evenly,
exactly.
you're going to have problems.
Exactly.
Right.
So.
Yeah. That's so interesting. How long did that last before they were like, this can't be sustainable?
I think we did it for almost 2 years.
Wow.
And the problem with it is once everything kind of fell apart and we got sent away from the ranch, we moved to back to Colorado, back to where we were living before.
Oh.
Our whole entire family moved out of Colorado City back to there.
Was it just your family that left the ranch and went, or did everybody get kicked out of the ranch at the same time?
I remember
the church no longer owns the ranch.
Yeah,
right?
I remember we got kicked out, and then a little while later, everybody else just slowly got kicked out, where there was no one left.
Well, kicked out by the law enforcement.
No, they were kicked out by the church. Yeah. So
because to date, the church does not own that.
They don't anymore, but I think everyone got kicked out of there before the church actually lost it.
So Warren was moving people back out.
Yeah.
So like, well, you guys haven't been righteous enough to free me from prison, so you know what? Screw all you guys. I'm sending you all back.
That's exactly what happened. Is we were told. So
I was being a little sarcastic.
No,
but
that was real.
That was right.
And what happened is we
Sad.
just get this little slip of paper, and we read it, and it says you guys are no longer allowed on the ranch. You need to go repent from afar.
Oh my word.
But like, I have no clue what we even did.
You took too much cereal from the storehouse.
Probably that's
2 weeks worth of shampoo. You're out.
That's probably exactly what happened. But I remember we all got sent away, but our dad was the bishop, so he stayed there. And we didn't realize this either, but he also had gotten sent away at the same time. So he gets kicked out, but he had to stay there for a month to help everyone kind of gather together, and so they could figure out what was going on.
Right.
So he actually ended up staying there, and we all moved to Colorado. And that.
So your whole family moved from the ranch back to Colorado State, not to confuse with Colorado City.
Colorado State. What happened though is the rest of our family that was still living at Colorado City moves to Colorado the state, and then all the people from the ranch moved to Colorado, or the Yearning for Zion Ranch. Mm-hmm. They moved from there to Colorado.
Okay.
So then our entire family's living in this little, it's like a 2 double wide stitched together.
Oh, boy.
There's 60 of us. And that's when the barn stuff was, where we'd be living out in the barn. And then what ended up happening, we're like, look, this isn't working out. I think I'm 18 at this time. So I'm like, okay, what I'm going to do is we're going to move to New Mexico, just the boys, and we're going to start working for our dad again. So I remember we moved there and I became a truck driver.
Okay.
I started driving truck for my dad, and then it's back when the steel prices were way up. Mm-hmm. And we started scrapping. So I would go from door to door. I was out on the Indian reservation. I'd go from door to door, and we would pick up cars, load them on trailers, and it was like me and my older brother, we would do this. We'd load them on trailers and take them down to Phoenix from New Mexico, and get the scrap money. I remember we were making like $10,000.
So you're on the Indian reservation, going to their homes and asking
for
to
old cars.
So can we just take this off your hands?
Yeah, we would pay them $20.
Okay.
So we were getting about $50 a car. We'd pay them $20, and then we'd show up and pick the car up and take it and go scrap it. So that's how we started living. That's how we started supporting our family that was living in Colorado.
Wow.
Interesting.
But there was I don't know what it was, but it was Lee Steed had a little storehouse out by, I can't remember the little town's name, but it's out by Pueblo as well.
So in Colorado State?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we would go there to get our commodities, everything that we needed.
So you're still kind of living that order.
Yeah.
In that same
Yeah.
way. Okay.
But we would go there and pick up all of our food and bring it back. But what happened is the ration started going lower and lower and lower. And we're like, we've got to live. So that's when all the boys went to work.
Okay.
And we went to work in New Mexico. And then from there, we started working. I actually went back to work for the construction company I was working before. And that's when I started moving all over the country again.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha.
And go ahead.
Oh, no.
Go ahead.
So many questions.
Everybody at once.
Everybody at once. So at that point, when your family's in Colorado and you're making money for your family, did you still think that there was like a chance, or was everybody still hoping that they could go back to Zion in Texas? Like, was that the goal? Like, when you're kicked out and you're told you need to repent, did everyone think, okay, now we just have to be more righteous so we can get back?
That's exactly what it was, is we had failed to bring him out of prison. We had failed to have the faith to bring him out of prison. So now we have got to go back to work, and we've got to start all over again and try to bring him out. But
sounds exhausting.
it was, and there was always this fear going on. There was everything going on at once. But we didn't know what was going on at all. But after that, Lee Steed ended up leaving. It was around this time. Lee Steed leaves. They seized our property there. So we moved back to Colorado City. We moved back into the Joseph Steed house.
Okay.
Oh,
Wow.
okay.
So we lived there for a little while, and then after that, we moved up to the Lewis Barlow house.
Okay. So then you spent quite a bit of time back in Colorado
That's
City.
that's a crazy full circle.
It
like,
was. So we're living at the Lewis Barlow house, and then they evict us out of there. And that's when everybody split up. That's when my mom, I remember we rented my mom a house, and it was up in Cedar City. And then all the other moms got houses rented for them as well. So then we're all split up, and we're just living everywhere, and I'm out working. And that's when I finally decided, look, I can't support my mom. So I went to work for a different construction company that was working in Denver. And then from there, I went to a place in Salt Lake City, worked for Wadsworth Brothers.
Okay.
And that's about the time we were working there. That's about the time when I finally left. I was 23 at the time, and I couldn't support my mom. I couldn't, it was so overwhelming. I was having all these different emotions about everything. I'm like, look, life is no fun. I was living out on the road. I had my RV, and I just lived by myself. Wow. And I'm out there working with people I didn't know.
And you were still supposed to be supporting your family.
Yeah, and I remember I was still paying for my mom's rent. I remember paying for everyone's cell phones that were in my mom's little group.
23.
Yeah. So I had about $150,000 worth of debt at this time. Some of it was an RV that I had bought, and a truck that I had bought, and renting a home, and doing all this stuff. Where if I would have been smart, I would have driven a little car, and I would have bought in a house, because the value would have just gone up and up and up.
Right.
And I would have put my mom in that little house. But, we weren't taught to buy homes, because we were taught at any moment we're going to get called back. So we can't
with the amount of times you move.
Yeah, we can't buy anything permanent.
No.
Because we're going to get called back at any second. But anyway, after this, I'm out working on I-80. We were building these little crossings out on I-80. And I just got sick and tired of that. I'm like, look, I'm kind of done with this. I'm done going back and forth and trying to live two separate lives, because by then I had just started listening to music, and I'm 23 at the time.
A rebel.
Wow.
Yeah, and so then I moved to Salt Lake, and I meet this girl. She was also in the church too, and we started seeing each other, and it got a little bit more and more and more. And I remember up in Heber City, and I had my first kiss and all of that, and it was like, I'm
like,
23.
Oh, there's more to life than just work, man.
Yeah, I'm 23 at the time, and that's finally, I'm like, whoa, this is awesome, you know? Like, I feel like I'm finally being a rebel, because I was the most loyal follower up until this time.
It sounds like it.
I was,
Yeah,
and I was.
you did all the
I was
things.
living to the exact T. Anyway, so I remember when I first, discovered this girl. We started seeing each other, and we ended up being like, okay, we're gonna leave. And I remember I'm in the Little America Hotel in Utah when we finally, left. And I remember she went down to Colorado City where she was living, and she would sneak into a certain little room and call me, and we would talk for hours, and it was so secret. And this is like way down the road, where she's 22 or 23 at the time, and I'm 23. I think she was a little bit, almost a year younger than I was.
Okay.
And so she would sneak down and she would call me, and then she's like, okay, I'm ready to leave. This is dumb. I'm sick of this.
Wow.
So what she did is I had my sister drive a vehicle down to Colorado City saying, hey, one of my buddies needs to drive this. So she dropped it off for me, and then they went back to Cedar City where they were living at the time. And I remember she went out and got the vehicle, loaded all of her stuff up in it in the middle of the night, and she sneaks off to Salt Lake.
Wow.
And anyway, her mom was heartbroken. Her mom hated me forever after that.
I can imagine.
My mom, the same thing. I remember when I very first did it, really bad. But after that, I was trying to make ends meet. And I remember I was going to get a tax return, because that's what we were, we would do whatever with our taxes and, try to support everyone. So I remember I was going to use my mom's kids as dependents so I could get my tax return. And it was right when I left. So she's like, nope, you are no longer getting these. And that's when I finally like, wow, reality hit me. I'm like, I'm on my own. There's no one or nothing to come and save me. And I ended up ruining my credit. I remember defaulting on like over $150,000 worth of stuff.
Wow.
And I'm 23 at the time, so I wiped my credit out, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I got to go to work. I've got to figure out how to. And I didn't know anyone at the time, and all I knew how to do was construction, right? Mm-hmm. So I moved to Colorado with a buddy of mine back to Denver, and
wait, so what happened to the girl?
She moves with me.
Okay.
She lives with me now at this time, and then we got in my RV and we moved to so it's this pull behind. So I hook it on my truck, and then we moved to Colorado.
Okay.
So we're living in Colorado.
Back to Colorado.
Yeah, back to Colorado. And I lived there for a little while, and then I'm like, okay, this isn't fun at all, because I was making, $25 an hour, but I couldn't work because it's wintertime, and we're working outside. So I'm like, this isn't working at all. So I moved to North Carolina. I'm just like, okay, I'm moving to North Carolina. I go out.
You're
and
like,
I start.
I finally have freedom. I'm going to move wherever I want and do whatever I want.
Yeah, this was after I had moved a lot of other places. So we moved to North Carolina for a couple months, and I was just in such a bad state of mind that, I'm having such this negative outlook on life that I gained all of this weight, and I'm there for a long time. And I'm like, you know what, this isn't working. So I moved back to Colorado, and I go to work for a buddy of mine. And then I worked for him for about 1.5 to 2 years. And I'm like, look, this isn't working between me and the girl. I was just a really toxic person at the time, had a really negative outlook on life because I had ruined my credit. I didn't feel like I had done anything with my life. I just felt so negative.
And you didn't have the skills to be able to do more, which
I did have those, but I didn't have the motivation. I just was not motivated. There was just nothing there. Like I felt like life had I felt like I'd given up on it. Like I didn't want anything,
Can I ask another question too before we get too much further? When you first left and your girl left and everything, at that time, when you decided to leave, did you, I know you were, leaving because you wanted to experience more in life. Did you not believe in the church? Did you not believe in Warren Jeffs anymore? Or did you still believe Warren Jeffs was a prophet, but you just felt like there was more to life? Because that was Sam's situation, but everyone's a little different. So
no, with my situation, I believed in it 100%. Still.
Okay.
Yep.
Like up until even a couple months ago, I had still believed in this. And I think after watching some stuff, I had finally put that to rest, where I'm like, you know what? I don't really believe in that anymore. I believe I was taken advantage of in a lot of ways. But anyway, going back to your question, the reason I left is because I wanted to go experience life. I wanted to go have a family. That was really all I wanted. I mean, you know, I don't know how much detail you get on into your show, but like, you know, I didn't ever get to have sex growing up.
Right.
I was 23 and I'm finally like, I don't know, like my testosterone levels were out the roof. I'm like, and I don't know how deep you guys want to go into any of this, but like
whatever
even
you're
that,
comfortable with. But yeah.
I never even masturbated. I did not even know what that was.
Yeah.
I didn't do that until I was 23. Like I never even masturbated until then.
Yeah.
Yeah, just doing everything that you were told, right? Like
and so I don't know if you would know, but like my hormones were out the roof. I had no clue what to do with all this energy, but yet I didn't want to do anything. All I could think about all the time was a girl. That's all I could think about. And that was the reason I left. Like I still believed 100% in it, but I wanted to have a family.
And as you continued and you were saying that like you were just having a hard time with attitude or, you know, being in the right headspace, do you feel like that was partially because you still believed this and that you were living another? Like I feel like anytime there's a dissonance between what you feel like you should be doing, right? All these shoulds are still probably in your head, and what you want to be doing, that can cause a lot of conflict and make it hard for anybody to be able to live a happy life.
And that's exactly what it was. Is I was so conflicted in my head that it took me to a place where I could not make a decision. I no longer could make any decision in my life. I felt like I no longer had control over it because the only thing that was holding me together was the negativity. Like I felt like a victim. I'm like, oh, I am taken advantage of, this and that and the other. But I still believed in it 100%.
Yep, that's very similar to the way I was. I mean, well, I don't know that I believed it 100%, maybe like 98.
See,
I was starting to have my questions.
Yeah.
But when I moved out, it was because I wanted to experience life. I wanted a different lifestyle, and I wanted to be able to, like you said, make some decisions on who I wanted to marry and all those things. And so anyway, and I was younger. I was 18 when I moved out. So you lasted a lot longer than I did.
Yeah, but I can understand that would be like a lot of conflict to still be working out when you're not leaving because you don't believe in the profit anymore. When you're leaving and you're like, this is what I want. That's what I should be doing.
Yeah, and that's why all of the conflict. But going back to what we did, so I ended up splitting up with the girl, and that was the next hardest thing next to leaving. You know, because it was the only girl I had ever really fallen in love with. So I moved from there. I moved down to Sacramento, and I lived in Sacramento for 2 years. And from there, I'd actually gotten to be pretty successful in Sacramento. I was making really good money. I'd met a lot of good people. But the problem with it was I still had a lot of negative thoughts about myself. I was still working on myself a lot. I went back into solitude, I guess, into myself. And I lived out on this 45 acre place on like a 6,000 square foot house, but it was most of the time just me living there by myself.
Wow.
And all I wanted to do was work. That's all I thought about. So during this time, I feel like I kind of found myself where I lost all of the weight that I had gained. I think I lost upwards of 70 pounds.
Wow.
And I was making really good money. I was a foreman for a big crew. So I felt like life was just going my way. But then as I got further and further down the road, I'm like, look, I need some kind of a girl. You know, this isn't working for me.
Yeah, you want more out of life.
You don't want to be
work.
lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And during this time, I went through all these different emotions. I mean, it went clear down into suicide, and I even attempted it a few times. Like, it was really, really bad. This is when, like, a lot of other stuff started happening. Like, I would start having these, I don't know what you call them, but it was where you can't move when you fall asleep.
Oh.
It's sleep paralysis.
Like the sleep paralysis.
Yes.
Yeah.
I started having that where, like, there would be entities in my room. Like, my mind was going absolutely crazy. I was, like, completely losing it. So I thought, you know what? I got to have a change of pace. So I texted this guy here in Las Vegas. I'm like, hey, I want to become a real estate agent. And at the flip of the switch, I did that. I got my license. Took me 8 tries to get my license, but I finally got it. I moved here and I was doing really, really well. I felt like I was kicking, just really kicking it, getting where I wanted to go. And then I had almost like a relapse. and my mind like completely shut down. So what ended up happening is I went to Salt Lake and I met with this lady there, and she did a bunch of electrode stuff to my head, where she was like shooting all these different electrodes into my brain that helped it know where to actually function at, because I was having these panic attacks every single day. I no longer wanted to do anything. But what I found out is that it was all in my mind, where I was living in such fear, which went all the way back to where I was from. And I never dealt with that.
Yeah.
So
almost like PTSD.
It was. And what ended up happening is it all came back, and it all, has a way of finding you again, and then you have to deal with it, or you.
Well, I mean, you experienced a lot more, and I would say some more of the negativity from the FLDS belief and some of the stuff you had to deal with, right? And because luckily for me, I never had to experience my family being torn apart down the middle like you did, right?
Or like,
and I never had to move 100 times, like just a random call in the middle of the night and say, hey, you guys have to move now, and you just pick up your small bag and you're gone, right? And so I didn't have to deal with some of those things. So I mean, I'm just proud of you for the hard work you've put in to get past all of those things, and obviously to work hard at being successful again. And
Thank you.
Live your own. Live your own life and do what you want to do, and because I can only imagine. I mean, I dealt with obviously I grew up there, and I know some of the things, but there are some hard things. So for me, the most difficult thing is just being separated from family now that I moved out and not being able to be with them and that. But anyway.
It's very admirable too to go and get the help that you need, and being able to do that takes a lot of like courage and strength. And so that's amazing that you were able to recognize that that's what you needed and to go make it happen.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And I think the problem with a lot of people is they won't actually reach out when they need that help.
Right.
And that's what I didn't do for a long time. And what I did is I would stack guilt on top of guilt on top of guilt until it was just crushing me to where I felt like, I did some bad things, so now this is what I deserve. I deserve this stuff. And anyway, it creates a lot of chaos inside of you. But thank you for that. But I feel like most people won't actually reach out when they need help. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to go, and they have a lot of their friends and family and all of that getting a lot of negativity or giving a lot of negativity to them for even reaching out. Like me, I have a picture of me hooked up to all these electrodes and everything, and I don't care. I would love to share that. Like,
good for
I
you.
was in a very bad space. I was
Good
in a
for
very
you.
bad spot.
Yep.
So me reaching out for help is actually what got me to where I am
to have the humility. Yes, exactly. And that's why I say congratulations on realizing, hey, I can't do this on my own, right? I need some help, and it takes humility to be able to realize that and to take that step. So that's amazing, and honestly, I wish that more people would feel that they could just reach out to someone, right, if they're in need.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too that when you come from a situation like your guys's, that reaching out, like you said, like some people will have more support system, and when you guys are also the part of the things that are causing you that PTSD, and then you're also leaving your support system at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't have those family or friends to rely on. So we'll definitely, I'm going to look up some resources as well and put them in the description of this video, so that if any of you out there are needing someone to reach out to or anything like that and looking for a place to be able to find help with your own mental health, we'll put some resources for you, because it's important for everyone to know that there are places for you to go and get help and be able to be happy and healthy.
Everybody needs someone to talk to.
That is a very much an understatement. And what I'll say too is I do really enjoy helping people, and I love being like an advocate for mental health, because I've suffered with it a lot. Like, I'm not going to be shy in saying I was suicidal for a long time. And what I would say is if anyone needs help, like even if I could help anyone, I would, feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah.
Because
Fantastic.
I've been through that, and so I can kind of see the signs of it, and I know what you're going through. And sometimes all you need is someone to say, "Hey, you're worth this. You are worth this." And I feel like a lot of us want to feel like we're martyrs from that community. where we'd tell people, oh, I would give my life for this. But why? Why wouldn't you live your life for you instead of trying to give it for something else that you don't even believe in?
Yeah. So it's awesome to see that you've come to that point now, right? I mean, because how long has it been since you moved out?
4.5 years.
Okay.
It really hasn't been that long.
Not that long.
No.
And you've gone through all of these things you just mentioned within those 4.5 years span.
That's a lot of life experience in a short amount of time.
Thank you.
And now, how are things going for you?
They're actually going really good. So I moved here to Vegas to become a real estate agent, right? And, I did a bunch of deals. And what I'm figuring out in life is you have to be consistent. It's something I've always lacked.
Amen.
I'm like,
amen.
Like we could stop right there and just call it a day. But what's funny about it is I get to a point where I'm like, oh, I think I'm getting a little bit of success, and then I tone the dial down, and I don't do the things I know I got to do to be consistently successful. Yeah. So my advice to everyone is stay consistent.
Stay consistent.
If you have a dream, stick with it.
100%. But it's great to see what you guys have built too. Like I look up to you guys. I admire you guys
in
what you guys have built, because one of my dreams was to have a family, to even be able to afford a home, to do all these things that I see you guys doing. So you guys are like the model family of what to actually do.
Well, thank you.
So I want to just say thank you guys so much for having me on and for allowing me to express myself freely like you have.
Of course.
But I do look up to you guys a lot, and I hope you guys know that.
Well, thank you so much.
We're so happy that you were able to come on and share your story. And we know that your story is going to be able to help and reach so many people. And just make a difference in people's lives, and know that they can overcome and be able to get past that guilt and the shame and be able to live happy, healthy lives. And
100%.
Yeah.
So thank you, Manti. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
And man, I'm just so happy to see that you are where you are in your life now, and that you've worked through so many things. And I think a lot of people look up to you for
Thank you.
Seriously though, because of what you've been through, and then to be able to work through that, that's not an easy task. So.
100%. Well, thanks you guys so much.
Thank you all so much. Thanks for watching, and we will talk to y'all soon.
We'll talk to you soon.